Let's set the scene. The year is 1182. We're in the scorching heat of the Holy Land, where a story is about to unfold that, honestly, it sounds more like a legend than actual history. This is a tale of a dying king, a world-famous conqueror, and a battle against absolutely impossible odds that would end up changing the very course of warfare itself. Just think about those odds for a second. 40 to 1. On one side, you have this tiny, desperate army. It's led by a king so ravaged by leprosy he can barely even hold a sword. And on the other, the largest, most intimidating Islamic army assembled in a generation, led by one of the greatest generals in all of history. I mean, military logic just screams that this is suicide. So, how on earth did they pull it off? It's a question that's puzzled military historians for centuries. How could this possibly happen? Well, the answer involves a king's desperate gamble, a truly revolutionary military invention, and a brutal lesson that would, in the end, seal the fate of an entire kingdom.
Okay, so to really get what's going on here, you first have to understand the two giants at the center of the storm. This wasn't just a clash of armies, you see. It was a profound clash of wills between two legendary leaders. For 2 long, exhausting years, a truce had kept the region in this state of fragile peace. You had the Christian kingdom of Jerusalem and Saladin's rapidly growing Ayyubid empire, and both of them desperately needed time to regroup, to recover, to rebuild. But, out in the desert, peace is often just a pause between wars. At the heart of this whole conflict were these two incredible men. On one side, you've got King Baldwin IV of Jerusalem. He's only 21 years old, a brilliant military mind, but he's trapped inside a body that's literally being consumed by leprosy. He was often wrapped in silk bandages just to hide his disfigurement. Facing him was the legendary Saladin, the man who united the fractured Muslim world with one single purpose, the reconquest of Jerusalem. So what shattered this peace? It wasn't some strategic masterstroke or a holy command. Nope. It was the reckless greed of one man, Reynald of Chatillon, the lord of Belvoir Castle. He controlled these vital trade routes, and even though there was a sworn truce, the glittering merchant caravans passing by his fortress were just a temptation he couldn't resist. So, in late 1181, Reynald attacks a massive Muslim caravan. The loot was enormous, but even more importantly, among the travelers was Saladin's own sister. When Saladin's envoys came demanding justice, Reynald reportedly just laughed in their faces with this insult. It was a slight so profound, so incredibly personal, that war was now unavoidable. Saladin called for jihad. And let me tell you, the army he summoned was unlike anything the Crusaders had ever seen. This wasn't just a raiding party. This was a force of nature, a storm of men and horses gathering to wash the entire kingdom away. By May of 1182, this is the number of warriors that had gathered at Damascus, 30,000. To give you an idea of what that means, it was the largest Muslim force assembled since the very first Crusade. This was an army built for total annihilation. Now, what made this army so terrifying wasn't just the sheer number of soldiers, it was its composition. At its core were 12,000 elite Turkish and Kurdish mounted archers who could fire with deadly accuracy at a full gallop. Behind them, 8,000 heavy cavalry, ready for that knockout blow, and they were supported by 10,000 more infantry and engineers. When this army was on the move, it stretched for 15 miles, a moving city of dust and steel, absolutely bent on conquest. And what could King Baldwin muster against this tidal wave? A mere 750 knights and around 4,000 infantrymen, scraped together from every single corner of his kingdom. The odds were just staggering. It really looked like a massacre waiting to happen. I mean, what do you even do in a situation like that? A conventional defense was completely out of the question. He needed a desperate, almost insane gamble that could somehow change the very rules of the game. Baldwin's plan was, well, it was nuts. He stripped his castles, the very backbone of his kingdom's defense, of all but a skeleton crew, and gathered every available soldier into a single mobile army. His commanders thought he was mad. They were arguing, look, it's better to lose a few villages than to lose the entire kingdom. But Baldwin's logic was brutal and clear. If his army was defeated, the castles would fall anyway. It was all or nothing. But here's the thing. Baldwin's crazy gamble, It all relied on a secret weapon, a new, untested, and revolutionary way of fighting that his soldiers had been drilling in secret. It was a formation that would completely rewrite the rules of medieval combat. So while Saladin's raiders were out burning villages, which actually bought Baldwin some precious time, the Crusader army was busy perfecting this brand new tactic. It was a complete reimagining of how infantry and cavalry should work together, and they developed it with remarkable speed. And they called it the Iron Hedgehog. Now, the concept was simple but absolutely brilliant. Instead of the knights just charging ahead recklessly like they usually did, the infantry would form a protective, mobile fortress of shields and spears around the expensive, irreplaceable heavy cavalry, keeping them safe from arrow fire until the perfect moment to strike. Okay, so here's how it worked, basically in 3 parts. First, you have the shell. The infantry lock their shields together, creating this continuous wall, kind of like an ancient Roman testudo. Second, the spikes. Spearmen would stick their long 14-foot pikes out through this wall, making any enemy cavalry charge pretty much suicidal. And finally, the counterpunch. The knights waited inside this protective shell, just itching to launch these devastating charges through specially designed gaps in the line. And in practice, this formation was devastatingly effective. Saladin threw everything he had at them. First, a storm of arrows from his mounted archers. They just clattered harmlessly off the locked shields. Then, his elite Mamluk cavalry. These were slave soldiers raised to be the finest warriors in the world. They charged. But instead of breaking the line, the formation just bent, absorbing the impact. Even a classic feigned retreat failed to lure the disciplined knights into a trap. Finally, Baldwin did the unthinkable. He ordered the entire Hedgehog to advance. It became a rolling fortress of steel that started to push Saladin's massive army back. Right at the most critical moment of the entire battle, the disease that was savaging Baldwin's body finally overcame him. He fell from his horse. But even then, he wasn't finished. His bodyguards caught him, placed him on a stretcher, and from that stretcher, the Leper King continued to direct the battle, a mask of agony on his face, whispering commands and giving hand signals. The effectiveness of this tactic was, well, it was shocking. The Muslim cavalry, who were trained for this fluid open-field combat, suddenly found themselves funneled into these kill zones. A Templar knight who survived the battle wrote this, describing a scene of just utter devastation, where Saladin's finest warriors were helplessly destroyed, trapped against that forest of pikes. Now, Saladin was no fool. He was a strategic genius, right? And he did the math. His army was losing thousands of men, while the Crusaders had lost fewer than 200. The exchange rate was catastrophic. His army's morale was cracking. So, with this cold, professional calculation, he gave the order to withdraw. He had been tactically outmaneuvered and soundly defeated. So, the Crusaders are celebrating this impossible, miraculous victory. But the battle wasn't really over. See, Saladin may have lost the fight, but he was about to win the war, all thanks to a powerful lesson he learned that day. He'd seen the Iron Hedgehog up close. He knew it was nearly unbeatable in a head-on battle. But he also noticed the Crusaders' fatal weakness, the price they had to pay for concentrating their entire army in one single place. Because while the main armies were clashing, Saladin's light cavalry had been busy. They had systematically swept through the Jordan Valley, burning and looting everything in their path. Crusader records tell of 60 villages that were reduced to charred earth. From the walls of Belvoir Castle, the defenders could only watch as these pillars of smoke rose into the sky. And this is where Saladin had his big aha moment. He realized he was fighting the wrong war. You could call this the birth of economic warfare in its medieval form. The Crusader kingdom depended on its agricultural revenue to pay for its expensive knights and maintain its castles. And those 60 burned villages? That represented an entire year's military budget, gone up in smoke. This was Saladin's epiphany. He didn't need a tactical counter to the Iron Hedgehog. He just needed to attack its supply line. Not the one on the battlefield, but the kingdom's entire economy. He could bleed the kingdom dry, forcing the Crusaders to defend everywhere at once, which would make them strong nowhere. And this leads us to the final tragic irony of the whole story. The tactical masterpiece that saved the Kingdom of Jerusalem in 1182 would be the very thing that doomed it just 5 years later. Baldwin died in 1185, so he never knew the consequences of his greatest victory. But by 1187, at the much more famous Battle of Hattin, Saladin applied every single lesson he learned at Belvoir.
He didn't seek a direct confrontation. Instead, he used raids to lure the entire Crusader army out into the desert in the blistering July heat, far away from water sources. He harassed them, he exhausted them, and when they finally broke formation in a desperate search for water, he destroyed them. The kingdom never recovered from that. Jerusalem fell. And it leaves us with this one last haunting question. The Battle of Belvoir was a tactical marvel, a testament to courage and innovation. But if your greatest triumph provides your enemy with the blueprint for your ultimate destruction, was it ever really a victory at all?